Let me ask you something. Are retro games still good? You know, the classic pixel sprites, platforming, or SNES style turn based RPGs like Final Fantasy 1 through 6 and Chrono Trigger? Well, Sabotage Studios sure seems to think so, and their crown is the game that's been talked about a lot on social media for the last few months: Sea of Stars. So first I want to thank one of our viewers for the comment that inspired me to check out Sea of Stars to begin with. I definitely saw some inspiration the moment I started playing this game. Thanks so much for the suggestion. I hope you like the result. Next, I just want to say something about the speed of the video. Now, I use OBS software to screen cap all of my videos. It's an indispensable part of the toolkit. It has been over a year now. OBS is the most popular video screen capture software for content creators, so if that's a tip that helps any other viewers out there, look it up. At the time of this video, OBS is free to download, and you don't need to be a complete whiz to figure it out. This is quite possibly the longest coloring project I've ever done. OBS recorded a total of 6 hours of footage that I went into making this. I tried really hard to make it something special, and Alessandra, the artist behind the line work, has a fantastic attention to detail. We haven't done her work in quite a while, but she was the same artist all the way back on our Villain Reveal project, if you want to check out that one next. Usually my videos are then sped up around 8 to 10 times the usual speed, and that maxes out at about my 20-minute mark for a typical project. This one was 45 minutes after being sped up. That's a long video, even by YouTube standards. But I didn't want to split it up into multiple videos, and talking for that long is just beyond my level of spoons, so it's a little faster. If you don't know what that means, look up spoon theory. I'll probably do a video on that later also, as mental health is a topic that comes up often on this channel. With that being said, the speed is a little more than usual, a full 15 times, but I hope you'll still watch to the end. That being said, let's talk about one of the Game Awards nominees for Best Indie Title of the Year. What is the Sea of Stars? And what does it all mean? Well, from the perspective of the game, Sea of Stars is actually Sabotage's second game set in this world. The first was called The Messenger, and it was released all the way back in 2018. Now, The Messenger largely flew under most people's radars. It's a platforming, sort of Ninja Gaiden-esque game with a nameless protagonist called The Messenger, who is destined to travel back and forth through time in order to be the savior of his world. We see some similar theme in Sea of Stars, starting with the first two main characters, Valere and Zale, the Solstice Warriors. Now, I'm not going to say too much about the gameplay of Sea of Stars, because I'd really like my channel to focus more on the analysis of story rather than mechanics. But with that being said, there will be some mild spoilers for Sea of Stars in this video. If you'd like to avoid that, pause now and go play the game. I highly recommend it. But don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring my bell so that once you've beaten the real final boss, you'll come back and enjoy the art. With that warning out of the way, let's get down to what makes this game's story so compelling. The game starts with a trio of children enjoying their days playing in the village of Mooncradle. A Mooncradle is called this because every so often, on either the winter solstice or the summer solstice, a child was delivered by a mysterious being known as the Great Eagle and placed under the Celestial Willow. Valere, the Solstice Warrior of the Moon, is the oldest by a good few months on Zale, the Solstice Warrior of the Sun, as they arrived one after another on the same year. This was an unprecedented event for the town of Mooncradle and gave the villagers much to celebrate. Through their life as Solstice Warriors, are raised communally by the people of Mooncradle and made important relationships, but probably the most important would be their best friend and my personally favorite character, Garl. Garl is actually the primary inspiration for this piece. When we're first introduced to his character, Garl is a kind-hearted but somewhat impetuous youth with a carefree attitude and a disposition brighter than the confident and fanciful Zale. After being introduced to his character, I got such a big kick out of how much he reminded me of Tam. And even when the trio is faced with impending doom, Garl is quick to protect his friends, even at the cost of his own health. But the group is rescued by Moraine, the headmaster of Zenith Academy. And while Garl's physical wounds are healed, their actions earned Valera and Zale an early introduction to their 10-year training to fulfill their destiny as Solstice Warriors. Well, so what does that all mean? Well, as I said before, they represent the sun and the moon. So this means that Valera uses a blue sort of mana that kind of references not only the moon, such as spells like Lunar Shield, Moon Meringue, and Crescent Arc, but she is also given an important prophecy to create paths on water. Zale, on the other hand, references the sun, and you guessed it, fire. Sunball and Dash Strike are two spells that show off Zale's strong affinity with not only sun-based elemental attacks, but Healing Light also makes him a useful support character in a pinch. And now just looking at these three, can you guess what Garl does? Well, Garl calls himself the Warrior Cook, and with good reason. He wields a pot lid and frying pan as his weapons of choice, provides a much-needed tank, and is one of the more useful healers for most of the game. Not bad for a guy with one eye who doesn't even know any magic, right? Garl's prowess at the campfire also provides the party with another useful mechanic. Sea of Stars doesn't have items like potions, so instead it's Garl's food that warms the rest of our heroes and keeps them all fighting fit. He can throw enemies with Hurl, heal party members with Nourish, and packs a mighty wallop with his Cooker Surprise. In total, there are 6 characters in Sea of Stars for you to meet, and all of them have their own niche that helps fill the party nicely. You can even switch between fighters in the middle of battle to unleash some devastating combos. With that said, let's move on to some inspirations that are obviously part of the Sea of Stars. The first and foremost is Chrono Trigger. Now, Chrono Trigger is a game that was released in 1995 by Square Enix, formerly Squaresoft, for the Super Nintendo. It is a widely popular game even now, having sold almost 2 million copies in Japan in just the first 2 months after it's released, and it's obvious the team of Sabotage love this game probably even more than I do. We see some similar themes between Sea of Stars and Chrono Trigger, saving the world from an insurmountable evil, Destined Warriors, time travel, a lot of themes that work their way into Tales of Atonement as well. The art for Chrono Trigger was provided by Akira Toriyama, the mangaka of Dragon Ball and Dr. Slump. It's ironic because do you know what game actually beat Chrono Trigger in sales the year it was released? Dragon Quest, another game with Toriyama's art. Now obviously Sea of Stars goes with a different approach. The characters are a bit softer with how they're drawn, and give more of a Tetsuya Nomura vibe. Think Final Fantasy and Kingdom Hearts. But the most compelling reason for me to play Sea of Stars was still the story and character design. So let's talk a bit more about that. Valera is a battle monk. Apart from using moon magic, she also wields a bow staff. She's tough, always ready for a challenge, and isn't afraid to test her limits. She'll get excited for a coming battle and is shown to have very chilled emotions until something bad happens, causing her to lash out with violence. Zil, on the other hand, feels like he's the calmer one. He's more in touch with his emotional side and takes long periods of quiet reflection. He's clever and resourceful, if not a bit quiet. Actually, between the two of them, Garl tends to do most of the talking. Whether it's negotiating with an Earth Wizard that's taken over a mine, consorting with pirates, or even defying death incarnate, Garl is easily the driving force that keeps our heroes focused on their ultimate task of ridding their world of an evil known as Dwellers. And what are Dwellers? They're the main antagonists of the game, possessing terrible power except during an eclipse. With the sun and moon in alignment, the Solstice Warriors' power increases dramatically, allowing them to topple eldritch horrors with efficiency. But how about those scarves? During their time in Zenith Academy, aside from learning magic and fighting skills, Valera and Zale were also made to weave. Yes, weaving, as in tailoring, just like Madeline and Tim. So these scarves represent many iterations made by Valera and Zale during their time at Zenith that imbued the cloth with magic until it was sufficient. And that's no joke. In many dark areas of the game, having Valera and Zale in your party means that you can actually see the blue or gold cloth glowing and giving away their position. Good thing stealth isn't much of a mechanic here. That's why I tried my best to really make the cloth look like it was shiny. I wanted to color it in such a way that it would give the appearance of a glowy cloth that was actually emitting a faint light, but not really enough to cast that on anybody else. After all, in the dark you can only see the cloth, and that's considering that despite being SNES style, the game does contain some dynamic lighting effects. Valere, Zale, and Garl would be reunited after 10 years of separation on their way to finally meet the Elder Mist, a being whose job is to provide Soulless warriors who have completed their cloths with a prophecy. And despite Garl not being a Soulless warrior himself, the Elder Mist is actually a pretty chill guy and gives him one. After that, the group is yeet to another continent where the story truly begins. So what about Martin equates him to Zale? Well, they both wield swords, although given the curve of Zale's sword, it looks a bit like a kopesh, the Egyptian sickle sword. They're both fire, blonde, and blue eyes. But actually I kind of feel bad. They are both really similar, having blonde hair and blue eyes, that I sorta inadvertently whitewashed Zale in this picture. And that's not my intent. The dark tan of Zale's skin just makes him further offset to Valere and makes him look like someone who spends a lot of his time basking in the sun's rays. Through their travels, Valere, Zale, and Garl meet a very colorful cast of characters such as Captain Cliché and her pirate crew, an immortal alchemist that sorta reminds me of our narrator, and even a dragon or two. The compelling story, the nostalgic graphics, the simple-to-learn mechanics, and the ease of access to gamers of all skill levels is punctuated only by Sea of Stars' fantastic OST. You're bound to find yourself with the music stuck in your head for days or weeks. And for those who really enjoy the older games we talked about, it'll definitely make you want to go back and relive those moments again, no matter how long it's been. There's actually a surprising amount of things this game does with puzzles akin to Link's Awakening, cooking a sort of fun minigame called Wheels. It would just take too much to explain that. It kind of reminds me of a robot boxing game. You know, the super old one where you try to launch the other guy's head into the air? And fishing. Yep, who would have thought that a game with such a focus on water and nautical themes would have fishing minigames? A lot of these things aren't so much tied to the story, but they are useful for achievements, and it really doesn't take too much to master most of the game's elements, so definitely give it a try. Now, as you all know, one of the things I love to talk about is the mythological basis behind certain stories. I looked for a while, but there isn't anything clearly obvious as stated by the game's creators. Given the design of some of the characters, I definitely get an Asiatic feeling. And then it hit me. Did you know a place called the Sea of Stars actually exists? On a beach in Maldives, bioluminescent plankton create a stunning effect on the water that makes it glow with thousands of little lights every night. This has, of course, attracted many tourists, and it's on one of my most wanted places to visit as well. So, then I began to wonder if there were some connections we could draw to Moldavian mythology and the Sea of Stars game. Not really. It's tentative at best, though I did find something interesting. Somewhere around the year 1153 CE and 1193 CE, depending on which copper plates you're reading, Maldives was ruled by a Buddhist king. Buddhist monks would often carry ritual staves called kakara, or a Peter staff. You may have seen this in media. It's the staff adorned with the top with many brass rings. Now initially these rings were used as a noisemaker to announce the monk's presence or even frighten away wild animals. It was later adapted as a sort of musical instrument, which is really kind of cool. But King Davimi of Maldives would be the last Buddhist king of the country. The story goes that a Sunni Muslim visitor named Abu al-Barakat ul-Barbari subdued a creature known as Ranmari, who was known for taking virgin sacrifices. Oof. After this, much of the country of Maldives converted to Islam, with the Sunni people bringing with them goods from India, the Middle East, and similar to like swords, such as the kopish that Zale carries. And this is all speculatory, As to my knowledge, Sabotage has never actually claimed a direct reference to any particular culture or mythology, with Ranmari's description of a large black beast emerging from the sea and blocking out the moon. It does bear a strong resemblance to what happens with the dwellers in Sea of Stars. Not to mention Buddhist beliefs circling around the sun and the moon. In many Buddhist art pieces, the sun and moon are depicted as silver and gold discs in the upper corners of a painting. But that's not all. Buddhism also contains a female sun god named Surya and a male lunar god named Chandra. Sea of Stars also has the sun and moon gods the solstice warriors all aspire to be like, Luana and Solon, respectively. It's not an exact one-to-one, but I think the similarities are enough to read some conclusions if you really wanted. Plus, there are some character designs that sort of hammer home the idea of Turkish, Hindu, and Buddhist cultures. It may even be that the Buddhist belief of the red string of fate may play into Valère and Zale's special cloths. But what can we possibly glean from their names? Valère is possibly French in origin, and the meaning is brave, while Zale is a Greek name that means sea strength. I like the thought that Sabotage might just put as much forethought into their character designs as we do. Last but certainly not least is Garl. This is a tricky one since it doesn't really seem to be an actual name. There's a divine character in Greyhawk called Garl, but it could just be a D&D reference. Another thing that could be related is the German name Garl, which is a type of copse, or a small circle of trees, which makes me think of the celestial willow that grows in Mooncradle. Speaking of which, did you guys know Buddhists have a very important belief about willows? The branches of willow trees are to drive away any unwelcome spirits or ghosts, giving it the nickname Ghost Terror Wood. It sounds awesome if you ask me. There's also a belief that if a young lady does not wear a willow branch during the clear and bright period, she will soon turn old. Well, I mean, here we have Valère wielding a wooden staff. It might be made of willow wood. But what is a clear and bright period? It refers to a period of meditative trance-like clarity attained by the practice of dhyana and the state of psychological stability and awareness. I think given that, the background I'm going to use for this picture is going to be the actual Sea of Stars in Maldives. I think it provides a sort of tongue-in-cheek reference that makes the overall picture really cool. Now that I'm nearing the end of this video, I just want to mention a couple other great things that Sea of Stars has done that might surprise some of you to know. This year's Video Game Awards nominated the game for Best Indie Title, which is awesome, and really impressive. The VGA airs December 7th this year, so we'll see soon enough just how good this game does. Another pretty awesome thing to happen for Sea of Stars is making the cover of this week's Famitsu in Japan. Famitsu is a weekly publication that's been in print from Japan for 37 years. Not many Western games can make such a claim, but it means the indie title joins a short list that includes some really great games like The Last of Us Part 2 and Horizon's Forbidden West. Sea of Stars is also in line to compete for Best Role-Playing Game against Goliath that is Baldur's Gate 3. Good luck, guys. I'm certainly excited and glad I played the game. It had a really sweet and touching story, great characters, simple to learn mechanics, and a fantastic soundtrack that, for me, stands out next to games like Celeste. And so, here we have it. Martin, Tam, and Madeline cosplaying as Zale, Garl, and Valère from Sea of Stars. And who knows, maybe there'll be a Tales of Atonement game one day. But for now, I hope you enjoyed episode 3. It'll be a few months before the next one comes, so like, subscribe, and ring my bell to get notified. I'll still be posting these weekly projects on Thursday at 3 p.m. Pacific Time. Art for this week was Alessandra on Fiverr. Look for her link down in the description, and also consider our Patreon page. Every dollar you spend helps fund this project and goes into hiring all our great artists, from musicians to voice actors to line artists and more. Plus, you get TOA bonus content, the comics, access to the full unpublished scripts which go months ahead of schedule. So check those out if you want to be the first to know about all things Monomyth. Thank you, Shadow Fox, Arya Gamari, Charles Tam, Jace Morland, and Lunder Lumen for being our patrons, and thank all of you for continuing to support our channel by watching every video. I'll see you again next week.